of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Congressman, what did you learn in today's hearing?
So Republicans are looking at
well, you know, obviously the facts are out, or at least we think the facts are out. We're going to make sure that we get all of the facts. But, you know, we're getting all twisted around the axle around whether this was legally classified, declassified, should it have been classified, is it a violation of the Espionage Act, is it a violation of the Records Retention Act? Look, don't lose sight of the main thing here, which is that this information was extremely sensitive and should have been classified and certainly should not have been on a Signal chat and absolutely shouldn't have been on a Signal chat to which a reporter was invited, right? We are just so lucky that Jeffrey Goldberg was the one who was invited, because if it had been some flame-throwing podcaster who very literally put it up on the internet the moment he got it, you know, the mission either would have been scrubbed 2 hours later, or the Russians or the Chinese might have given the information to the Houthis, who might have moved their anti-aircraft equipment around, and we would be looking at dead pilots or sunken United States naval vessels.
Congressman, how worried are you, given the lack of accountability here, their lack of interest in accountability, that something like this could happen again?
Well, honestly, I think this is tomorrow's project, because we had ample opportunity today to talk to at least the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and the Director of CIA. I think the Secretary of Defense has a lot of explaining to do to the House Armed Services Committee. But I will tell you that the unfinished business here, this was a catastrophic mistake. And they happen from time to time. This one was particularly catastrophic. So what happens when anyone makes a mistake? They say they own it. They apologize, and then they say, we're going to learn from that mistake, and then they impose accountability. None of those latter steps have happened here. Yesterday, Mike Waltz is on Fox News and in the White House attacking Jeffrey Goldberg, calling him a loser. The Secretary of Defense is still not doing what he would require all of his people to do, which is to take responsibility and start the process of making sure that it never happens again. So until those basic steps, which we demand of 5-year-olds in this country when they misbehave, until those steps get taken, we're going to have a real problem.
It's interesting. I have a 5-year-old, and I made the exact same comparison. We have that Fox interview that you referenced with Mike Waltz. Let's just play a little bit of it.
You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact. So, of course, I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now, whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
But how did it end up in your
that's
phone?
what we're trying to. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, but that's a pretty big problem. Was there someone else supposed to be on the chat that wasn't on the chat that you thought was
so
on
the person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was
who was that?
I think they're missing the forest for the trees here, in that, yes, it is a problem that a reporter was added to the chat. But the real problem, as I understand it, Congressman, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that this type of chat and deliberation was happening on an unsecure platform. Period. Even if he had never introduced Goldberg into the equation, that is almost the secondary piece of this. The primary piece is this is not how and where these types of deliberations are supposed to happen. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. That's why we spend so much money and so much energy around classified systems that allow these people to communicate without any risk that a reporter is going to randomly wind up on the system. It's why we have armed guards and members of the military guarding the Situation Room and police guarding our skiffs, because we take enormously seriously the fact that these deliberations, you know, whether they should or should not have been classified, whether they were pre-decisional, they simply cannot see the light of day. And lo and behold, with this Signal chat, not only did they see the light of day, but this reporter was invited on. You know, you're exactly right. Jeffrey Goldberg is an illustration of why the idea to set up the Signal chat and to share that F-15s are launching now and Reaper drones are going with it, you know, Jeffrey Goldberg is a perfect illustration of why you don't do this.
Congressman, you talked about what it would look like for there to be accountability here, what it would ordinarily look like, that someone would own it, that there would be an apology, and then there would be accountability to make sure that it did not happen again. We are not seeing any of that. Given that, do you believe that Pete Hegseth or Mike Waltz should resign?
You know, it hurts my ears when you play that clip of Mike Waltz answering legitimate questions about how Jeffrey Goldberg gets on the Signal chat and he says a loser. He attacks Jeffrey Goldberg, which of course is what the Secretary of Defense has done over and over and over again, right? As though that were somehow relevant, to besmirch another person when you made a mistake that could have cost people their lives. I mean, you just feel that, don't you? So to answer your question, I think the Secretary of Defense has a lot to answer for. First, why he was putting fairly specific Defense Department, and we can get all twisted up over whether it was plans or intentions or how specific it was. It had no business being there. But his response has been entirely inadequate. And if he can't do what he would demand of his soldiers, his Marines, his airmen, and his sailors, and if he can't say, I screwed up, I'm sorry, and here's how we're going to fix that problem, and leave Jeffrey Goldberg out of this, he needs to resign.
It is one thing to talk about Pete Hegseth and Mike Waltz. I don't need to remind you that they are all acting in the service of the President of the United States of America, the Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump. What responsibility does he bear here?
Well, they report to the President of the United States, but both of them take oaths to the Constitution of the United States. And under this presidency, that's a really important distinction. So if your question is, do I expect that Donald Trump is going to look at this situation and say, clearly mistakes were committed and people should own those mistakes and we should learn from them and we should deliver accountability? Do any of those words sound like words that we're likely to hear from President Trump? I don't think so.
I appreciate the distinction. It is, in fact, very important. These are people who are supposed to work for us, who are supposed to uphold the Constitution. And I think there are big questions about whether or not they're up to that task. Congressman Jim Himes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.